Good morning. My name is Councillor Anthony Kelly. We're here today to listen to the summary review of the Star and Scorpion London W13 8RA. Welcome to today's hearing. I will be chairing the hearing with my colleagues Councillor Jammu and Councillor Ball. We are today's subcommittee. Our legal advisor to the committee is Alison Love. Also present is Mr. Jack Roberts, who is clerk to the subcommittee and will be minuting the meeting. In accordance with procedure, I shall invite the police to present the application for a review and call upon any witnesses in respect of whom permission has been given and answer any questions put to them. Then I will invite the premises to make their representations and answer any questions, and then the parties to briefly sum up their respective cases. At the end of the hearing, the subcommittee, accompanied by the legal advisor and the committee clerk, will retire to consider its decision. The decision will be given at the end of the meeting and confirmed in writing as soon as possible. So if the police team could, I believe it's Mr. Guriet will be presenting the application.
Yes. As you know, there was a murder at the premises on the 23rd of July, the night of the 23rd of July. It was a somewhat brutal murder. The deceased was stabbed twice with an 8-inch or so knife, once in the stomach, and the fatal wound was through the chest, penetrating the heart. Inquiries reveal, by the way, the assailant has been arrested. Both he and the victim seem to be in their late 50s. The matter, being so fresh, you will understand, is still under investigation. Superintendent Bennett, giving the certificate necessary to kick off these proceedings, said, I quote, "The incident was so serious that in my view, the matter should be put before a licensing committee as soon as possible." And I respectfully agree with that and hope the committee does as well. PC Smart, who actually made the application for the review, asks for immediate suspension of the license. And she says the management have failed to promote the licensing objectives. And there are several factors cumulatively, and I emphasize the word cumulatively, that lead to that view. I've made a list of 5. The first, and they all relate to serious staffing issues. The first is that the staff failed to call the police. It was the London Ambulance Service that called the police. What happened, both the fight and the killing that was the climax of it, self-evidently necessitated the police being called, and currently we have no explanation as to why they weren't. PC Smart has viewed the CCTV and notes that the assailant was bundled out by some of the crowd, and the staff, as we understand it, behind the bar, did nothing to prevent that. Thirdly, and importantly, there was no attempt to administer first aid to somebody who clearly needed first aid, and it's questionable whether indeed a first aid kit was available. It's regrettably the case, and it's my words, that the failures of the staff display a lack of competence, because irrespective of whether there had been a crime committed or any violence committed, it seems that they weren't competent even to deal with an accident. On a full review, I would be suggesting conditions were strengthened to require staff training. And until such training is given, I suggest it is right that the premises should not be open. The fourth on my list is that only 1 door staff seems to have been available. Figures of 100 people and 200 people have been given to me. 1 door staff is inadequate for either number. Currently on the license, there is no SIA condition. And again, it may be thought that when this matter is looked at a full review, the conditions will need to be strengthened in that regard. I note in passing there is uncertainty as to whether even that 1 door staff was SIA licensed. No doubt that'll be looked into and we will be told. Fifthly and finally, on staffing issues, there are breaches of condition displayed on the CCTV. The no entry after 11:30 condition number 8 has been breached. Drinking in the street condition number 28 has been breached. There's a lot of telephone calls this morning between Mr. Craig and PC Smart. My understanding is, and I'll be corrected quickly if that understanding is wrong, there is no dispute that those conditions were breached. What it leads to, in my submission, is again inadequate supervision and a question mark, because the breaches are so flagrant, a question mark as to whether the staff even knew of the conditions that were being breached. An overriding issue concerns the suitability of the designated premises supervisor. When police expressed concern that a knife had been brought onto the premises, his response was, "So what?" And he went on to say, I'm summarizing the words to the effect that there was nothing he could do about it. There was a range of things that could be done to prevent that, but it's the attitude of the DPS that is troubling. It's understood that he was across the road at the time, attending other premises, and whether or not he's dividing his responsibilities too thinly is something that will have to be looked into in the days to come. My suggestion is there is quite obviously a great deal to be done to put the Star and Scorpion house in order, and it cannot be done overnight. There's no quick fix to this. And that in summary, to allow the premises to remain open before the house is put in order would be to undermine the licensing objectives and quite clearly risk public safety. I've galloped through it in summary, but that is the summary of what the police have to say.
You're on mute, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Guriet. Obviously, you have the police with you to answer any questions that may have. So, Mr. Duncan, on behalf of Mr. Mohammed, do you have any questions to the Mr. Guriet?
No, Chair. It's Mr. Craig, Chair.
I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah. Go. Yeah, you've no questions.
No, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Always startles me slightly with barristers that they don't have questions. Unlike.
But it's cross-examining me that Duncan was scared of, I think.
No.
Terrified, sure. Gerald.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have to. Just bear with me, sorry. I've just lost my my notes that I was referring from. Yes. Just bear with me, sorry. Do you have any witnesses, Mr. Guriet?
Yeah, ready to answer detailed forgive me, questions in more detail than I've already given. I have PC Smart here. I've summarised everything she's told me, but if anybody has questions of her and further inquiries that have been made, I see her sitting there ready to take questions.
Okay. Well, I guess we could go to Mr. Craig, if you want to respond.
Certainly, Chair. Thank you. I'll commence, which may truncate matters to some extent. The application for a suspension is not opposed. Clearly, there's no dispute. There's been a fatality on the premises, and it is accepted by the licence holder. There needs to be a period of reflection, as Mr. Gouret has correctly pointed out. I have been in dialogue with Kerry Smart, and I intend to continue on that basis next week. Kerry has asked for CCTV footage, which she actually asked for it to be delivered this morning, but my client is here today to answer any questions that you may have. And so we've agreed that the CCTV will be delivered early next week by my client to her directly. No suggestion of any lack of cooperation. I think sometimes you have to be careful not making yourself a hostage to fortune, but I think it's right to say at this stage that there are a number of factors and matters that are asserted in the review application that we simply don't accept. First of all, there was an effort to call 999 at 23:53. I actually have a screenshot of that, which I'll share with the police, as I say, next week. Simply couldn't get through. And so I think the call that was made to the 2999 and the ambulance service and all the police, by the time that the member of staff was still on the phone when they turned up. So to suggest that hasn't happened is certainly based on my clear understanding is that is the case. Secondly, the perpetrator of this murder, unlawful killing, he ran out of the premises, and they were unable to stop him. And obviously they were attending. Well, the victim was being attended to. The victim was attended to by his at the scene by his I understand his partner and another person there. And I'm going to look into that. I'm just so you know as well, Chair, I'm going to the premises on Monday morning, and I will be sizing the premises up, getting an understanding of the layout. And so certainly the first aid matter that Mr. Gouret mentioned will be one of the matters I'll be discussing with my client. My clear instructions are that any suggestion there were 200 people in there, not that necessarily is an issue anyway. I understand there are 185 seats in the premises, and on that basis, having 200 people in there wouldn't necessarily be anything that would of itself undermine the licensing objectives. My understanding was he says there's no more than 110 people in, and obviously that we are delivering the CCTV footage. I don't agree with Mr. Gouret actually on the door staff position. I mean, look, there are things that are more foreseeable than others in situations such as this. This is a restaurant. 50% of its turnover is food. I have spoken to the Star Pubs and Bar area manager this morning, and I'm hoping to meet him there on Monday as well. And he says to me, the barrelage of this may be alien language to one or two people, but it does 50 barrels a year. Now, I know from my days at Whitbread that we wouldn't even deal with an account that was less than 100 barrels. So it is very much a food-led premises. So the suggestion that one door staff wasn't sufficient, don't necessarily agree with that. And any suggestion that a restaurant should have a search policy. I mean, I understand that knife crime is a huge problem in this country, and certainly in urban areas. My practice is based in Birmingham. I understand that, but if we're actually at the point where people are having to be searched going into a restaurant, that is an extremely troubling state of affairs, not just in terms of these premises, but more generally. So I just question that in terms of the practicality and the proportionality of that in what is a food-led business. The member of door staff was and is SAA registered, and I will share his details with the Met again early next week. And in terms of the DPS, well, he does have another restaurant over the road, which is not licensed. So in terms of his responsibilities. There's no requirement for DPS to be present all the time. And to suggest just because he wasn't there at the time of this incident, that he's not applying himself to these premises, well, I don't think that is. Don't think it's fair to take that snapshot and work on that basis. My client has invested a lot of money in these premises, and he is. He is a business owner that works the business himself. He is he's a grafter. I know that from speaking to the area manager. So to suggest that, I don't think is fair based on the fact he didn't happen to be there at the time of this incident. So I just essentially the essence of my submissions today are the suspension is not opposed. We don't agree with a number of matters that are asserted in the review application, but that I will add this as well. Mr. Gouret is slightly wrong when he says that full and complete admissions of breaches were acknowledged. I acknowledged that one or two of those, it would appear one or two of those conditions have been breached. I acknowledge that at this stage. But the police case at its highest, we say, is not a true or fair reflection of the position. But notwithstanding that's what the purpose of the next 28 days is for, in order for a clearer picture to develop, for the premises to positively engage with the Metropolitan Police Service and other responsible authorities as required. And to cooperate with the investigation more generally. Clearly, it's a hugely serious incident, and to identify following or during that process, as quickly as is reasonably practicable, what steps can be taken, and that will be taken on board. What steps can be taken in order to focus on promoting the licensing objectives going forward. So there's no pushback here against this suspension. I did speak to my client. Look, my client is entitled to open this weekend. Just because his premises license is suspended doesn't mean he isn't lawfully entitled to open. But there is a recognition by him, and we've discussed it, that isn't appropriate at this stage. We need to press pause, take a sober look at things, understand what's happened, understand if there's any steps that we need to take, and work with the Met to try and achieve that. And I welcome what Mr. Gouret has said in that regard, and what he clearly views is a proportionate way forward, and I'm grateful for that from him. So that's it really. So I'd be amazed if you don't suspend it now, given what I've said. So let's try and work together going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Mr. Gouret, anything in response, sir?
No, sir, thank you. In view of what's just been said, I don't think I have any more to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think before we retire, just out of courtesy, do you have any questions from councillors to either the applicant or the licence holder's representative? No? Okay.
Yes, well, sorry.
Councillor Ball has a question.
Yeah, John.
Yeah. So, quick question for Mr. Craig. I mean, can you just confirm that it is a standard pub type license that doesn't have a requirement for substantial food? You were referring to it as a restaurant.
It doesn't have that requirement. No, there isn't. That the old 1964 Licensing Act, the ancillary alcohol being ancillary to food or but there's a number of iterations of that. No, it doesn't presently have that. No, and I'm not taking. Look, I'm going to the premises on Monday, and there will be a number of matters that I will discuss, both with my client and then following that with Mr. Gouret and or Kerry Smart, about how we can make this license, improve this license. Look, there's an acknowledgement here that the conditions he's looking at, so that's agreed as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got no indications from anyone.
Yes,
yeah.
my hand's up, Chair.
Go ahead. Yeah, I can't see your hand, so go on.
Okay, thank you. My question is to Mr. Craig. My understanding is that this is actually a pub. It looks like a pub from outside, and yet you're saying that it's more a restaurant than a pub. I don't quite get that, because I haven't actually.
Well, it was a pub. It was called the Star and Anchor. I have discussed if you take a photograph of the outside, it says restaurant outside. I would say, based on my 20 years in the trade before I came to the bar, that a premises where 50% of their takings are food, 50-50 split, can quite properly be described as a restaurant. But where the lines between a bar, a pub, and a restaurant begin and end is a matter of debate. But I feel comfortable referring to this as a restaurant because food is such a huge part of the business, and the area managers echoed that. So it used to do 5 years ago, it did 150 barrels of beer, and now it does 50 barrels. So you can call something a restaurant, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is. It has to display certain characteristics. There are 185 seats in here. 50% of its turnover is food, and it does 50 barrels of beer. All those are factual matters that point towards the nature of this premises being in accordance with what one would expect from a restaurant. So I feel comfortable describing it in those terms.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I've got a question for Mr. Mohammed, please, Chair.
Well, if you want to ask Mr. Craig, then obviously he can ask the question to his client.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Craig. Now, this being a pub cum restaurant, as you say, and I understand this was a private party.
It was.
So this private party in the pub attachment, or is there a separate attachment where they hold private parties?
No, it was in the main part of the premises. Somebody hired it out, which is not an uncommon occurrence at all. It was a private party, and the person who booked it, as I understand it, was known to my client. None of the people who were involved in the incident were known to my client. So the victim, his girlfriend, and the perpetrator weren't known to my client. I asked him that last night, but he knew the person that had booked the party.
So were there members of the public in attendance at the same time as this private party?
I don't believe so. But if Mohammed, could you just confirm that, please?
Could you ask your
There is
client?
no Hi, there is no member of the public, only the family and friends. It was the private
Thank you.
party for the
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, it's Councillor Kelly here, Chair. I've faded out there, so I'm not. Councillor Amrijit was asking the question. Did we get that resolved? Hello.
I did get the answer, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. So what happens now, everybody, is we will again. Mr. Guriet, obviously, the sense. Sorry, Mr. Craig. Anything else you'd like to add before we go and deliberate?
No, I don't suppose this is going to be the hardest decision that you've ever made.
No, just
as a committee. I don't believe I need to repeat anything I've said, other than my client will work positively with the Met.
Your indication to cooperate is duly noted. Okay, so we asked people to leave the room. It's just coming to 11 o'clock. I would anticipate, I'm very confident that we'll be back in the room promptly to start the meeting at 11:30. So if everyone could be back in the waiting room at 25 past, that'd be excellent. So yeah, 25 past. Thank you.
I'm not sure how I leave or how